Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the type of politicians that we're seeing all across the Western world at the moment and have done for sort of some time, and just how unimpressive they are. Let's look at Justin Trudeau. And the guy's never had a real job in his life. He was like a part-time drama teacher hanging around with children. Then he was a ski instructor hanging around with children or young people trying to learn to ski. I mean, the guy's never had a real job. And you listen to him, he sounds like a child. Even when he was standing there making his big tough speech about martial law, he sounds like some sort of undergraduate from a third tier college debating club or something like that. He's standing there, like he's still a drama teacher in the classroom. That's his only frame of reference to how to behave. The way he walks, the way he stands, his hair. He's a drama teacher of 21 years old talking to 16-year-old children, and looking all cool with the girls and this sort of stuff. I mean, he's still that, and yet he's the Prime Minister of Canada. Now, the globalists have put him there, and they're keeping him there. The globalist controlled media is backing him up, and the globalists are, all behind him. But just looking at how unimpressive the guy is. Now, if you look at the people around him, look at the Deputy Prime Minister, Christia Freeland, and she's out there making speeches about, and she's the Finance Minister as well in Canada, making speeches about how tough they're going to be with the banks and seizing bank accounts and this, that, and the next thing. And again, she sounds like sort of a kindergarten teacher. I mean, she's got that sort of manner about her, and the whole way she stands and talks. It's very childish, and yet he's the Deputy Prime Minister. Now, I think the only, as I understand it, at least the only job she's ever had was a journalist, where she seemed to not really achieve anything or produce anything. She's working for Reuters, which is a big player in pushing globalist propaganda and supporting it. So, and she's also got some relationship, as I understand it, with the youth wing, or had with the youth wing of the World Economic Forum. Now, they couldn't have spotted her as a talent early on. I mean, she's in my view, she's a fucking moron. So it's not talent they were spotting. So maybe they gave her a very long apprenticeship at Reuters just so they could use her for the propaganda value. But I don't know. She sounds so unconvincing to me. And again, sounds like some sort of trainee kindergarten teacher, not someone you'd have doing anything important or responsible. So I assume she's just there as a propaganda mouthpiece. Same goes for that woman who's the climate in Trudeau's government, was the climate minister or something like that. I think it was called McKenna, I think the name was, and she was nicknamed Climate Barby. And you listen to her, and again, you're dealing with some snotty child. Maybe a 19-year-old girl with attitude, and who gets a nose out of joint over all sorts of things, and tries to ban journalists that won't ask her nice questions. I mean, it's just, overall, it's just completely pathetic. Yet these are the people who are, looking at the globalists, the entire, because the globalists control all the Western governments. And you've got Boris Johnson. He sort of got himself elected. He was the rebel. He was the outsider. Nobody would control him, and Boris was the ultimate gadfly, and he was going to get Brexit done. He was going to do this thing. He turned out to be, the most pro-globalist prime minister you possibly could have had. He made Cameron and Theresa May, who are also very pro-globalist, made them look almost tame by comparison. I mean, given the amount of illegal immigration and the incredible climate change nonsense that's going on over there, and the greening, and of course poor households paying way more for their electricity than need be. So these are the sort of the clutch of politicians. So I want to talk about a couple of them, and I've sort of have on and off been indirectly or directly, even in some cases, involved with the body politic in Australia. I used to do a tremendous amount of business travel, so I was frequently sitting next to politicians and professors of political ideology and whatnot, and political economy, and on aeroplanes and that sort of thing. So I got to be got to sort of see quite a wide cross section. In fact, Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, or alleged father, I was sitting next to on one journey, sitting next to one of his advisors, political advisors, and got a very interesting insight into Canadian politics and Trudeau there. When you're sitting on a plane next to someone for a few hours, like a sort of New York to LA type flight where you got like 4 or 5 hours or something like that, then it's you got plenty of time to talk. And I was an avid listener, and they were happy to talk and while I was listening and asking questions and so on. But the politicians that I remember sort of when I was younger, and bear in mind I was younger and less sophisticated then, they all seemed to be a bit brighter, and if not brighter, not all of them were bright, by the way, but if not bright, very committed to representing the people and improving the living standards of the people. They were very committed to that. Even if they weren't that bright, they had that. And they may have argued about different ways of getting there, more welfare or less welfare, those sorts of things. But all the politicians that I met were committed in some way to that. Some were on trips of personal aggrandizement, but hey, that was, you're always going to get some of that. But that idea of supporting and representing the people was certainly foremost in the minds of the politicians that I came across, and there must have been outliers and then. But this is different today. You struggle to come across even a single politician in the West that gives a shit about improving life standards or living standards of the people. They're in it for themselves, and they're there to represent the globalists and receive their instructions and orders from the globalists, or at the very least their orders from those controlled by the globalists. So that's now if we look at, there's a federal politician in Australia that I think he'd either announced his resignation from Parliament or had already just left, but he was in a sort of well-known coffee shop cafe in Sydney, and some people that I was having a meeting with, one of them knew him or knew one of his staffers and therefore had met him or something. So I kind of got an intro through that. But I sat down with him because I'd seen him on TV, and his speech just seemed a little bit stilted, and he had that look on his face like he's repeating things he didn't know what he was talking about. But he was he'd won sort of an election by a landslide, and he'd won, I think, a couple of elections, maybe 3. And so he was certainly up there. He'd been, on various quite heavyweight committees in the federal parliament. So I thought, well, if anyone knows what's going on, it must be him. And I assume because he'd received such positive coverage in the press that there must be something going for the guy. But not that I noticed it necessarily, but well, there must be, So I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm missing the brilliance that lies discreetly within. So I made the point of sitting down with the guy and talking to him. And he just came out with one globalist talking point after another. Just climate change, Nazis everywhere, mass migration is wonderful. If you don't like it, you're a fascist, and just went one globalist talking point after another. The guy didn't have original thought. Now, if you're just listening to him, the way he was delivering it, he didn't even know what he was saying. He was just parroting it out. And when I asked a few questions, fairly simple ones, like, well, what evidence do you have to support that? Oh, there are studies. What studies? Oh, well, if you're a Nazi, then I don't want to talk to you. No, really, what studies? So the guy just parroted, as I say, the globalist talking points, and was used to these being just accepted without query. Now maybe people were just being polite and nodding, but he was completely unused to the look on his, the look of sort of I don't know, mild shock on his face for just being asked a simple question like, where did that information come from? For example, he said something along the lines of, there's an epidemic of wife bashing going on in Sydney at the moment. Oh, wow. Oh, goodness me, and they're bashing the children. Just all these evil, and it's only white men apparently. All these straight white men are just beating their wives and beating their children. Suddenly there's an epidemic of it, right now. So, all right, well, what do you base that on? And he fumbled, he ummed and ahed and didn't know. It's everybody knows. Well, no, they don't. So the guy was just a globalist talking head. He was just a flunky. He was a stooge. And he was, I wouldn't, how he got elected to anything's quite beyond me. But really, I'd rate him as a, some sort of junior, maybe mid-level accountant in the public service. That would be the height of his achievements. So I'd put him there, and yet somehow he was being lionised in the media as some great leader and so on. And he was nothing of the sort. The guy was this guy was a fucking moron. So anyway, that was that. So I smiled and politely, thanked him for his time and shook his hand, wished him well, and off I went. But I was like, wow, gee whiz, they're electing people like that to federal parliament to represent the people. You've got to be kidding. Then another time I was in a very fashionable cafe, probably not long afterwards actually, and there was a federal minister in there, and she was sitting there with a couple of I think her minders or flunkies or advisors or whatever, and she I'd seen her often frequently on the news, again lionised in the media, very much into pushing the climate change agenda. So as you can imagine, the globalist media was right behind her, talking her up all the time. She must have heavy makeup when she's in TV. She didn't look anywhere near that good in real life. But so I'm in the and it had been raining, so I had an umbrella and I had the coffee and I think it was maybe a bagel or something like that. And so I had to put and it was pretty busy, the coffee shop. It was like standing room only. So I put the umbrella on the side of the table, not near them, near this politician. I just put it there momentarily so I could readjust my holding of the coffee and the bagel, and then I wasn't bothering on getting in their way or pushing them or taking up space on the table or anything. And she put on the face of someone who was used to telling other people what to do and getting around the way, but she spoke like, again, a snotty teenage girl, and. You can't sit here. You can't be here, and so I'm not trying to sit here. And just take it easy. Just let me get my bagel and coffee organised. And but she was quite concerned about the and this is not the umbrella laying across the table. It's like the handle of the umbrella hanging off the edge of the table, and again, not near them or getting in their way. So. But the attitude, the snotty attitude, and the narrowing of the eyes, the way she looked, it was like a predator animal about to pounce, that sort of thing. And hey, you're not in fucking Parliament now. Don't talk to me like that. And so I'm not one of your flunkies. So I didn't say that. I didn't say anything. I sort of smiled and said, "I'll just be a moment, if you'll excuse me," and that sort of thing. But I moved off a little bit. But again, because the place was so crowded, I sort of had nowhere to go. And so I could hear what they were saying, and just listening to the talk there, and her minders or advisors weren't particularly bright, but they were like double as bright as she was. So just listening to what she was saying and how she's working it out, and how she was thinking through issues, I was amazed at how stupid she was. I thought, I can't believe this is a federal minister in the government. She actually reminds me of that McKenna woman in Canada, that climate Barby. It seems to be about on par with her. And all attitude and girly snottiness, that sort of thing. So that was it. So I've sort of come across a number of other, some sort of overdo the humility thing, and whereas they're quite corrupt in their dealings and everything. But generally it's hard to find impressive politicians. There are politicians that I've thought maybe could have been impressive. Like I've admired the way they're prepared to get up at town hall meetings and argue their case. I think that's admirable. Very few will do that now. Take questions, real questions from the audience, not planted flunkies. If Donald Trump is so evil, what will you do to stop all the Nazis? Not those ridiculous questions that Hillary and those idiots used to get, but real questions from a real audience and people with real concerns that they want addressed. So, but coming now to the World Economic Forum, now this Klaus Schwab, he's a big sort of player in this, and he's really the sort of the front man who's pushing it. By 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. We'll all live in little pod cubicles, and we'll just be just be serfs in the the new the neo feudalism of less than 10 years and into the future now. So that's all pretty scary. Now I don't know. None of us are going to vote for that or agree to it, and so it's going to have to be forced on us. But given they already own all the Western politicians and own all the media and own the banks and everything else, and they probably can force it on us if they really want to. I mean, look at the way the police and the army are used against citizens who've committed no crime in the West at the moment. That's pretty scary. Police and army have been politicised. They're no longer the community policing or the defence safety force that they once were. They're now just completely politicised, and that in itself is scary. But let's look at Schwab now. What we're supposed to believe with Schwab is that I'll just go into a little bit of background. I think, as I understand, he's German-born but lived in Switzerland for quite a while. And how he speaks 3 or 4 languages, which is not unusual for Switzerland. Whenever I went to Switzerland, people would. Switzerland is bordered by sort of Germany in the north, Austria in the east, Italy in the south, and France in the west. So they tend to be. Pretty much everyone in Switzerland speaks at least 2. Mostly 3, if not 4 languages. That's not unusual. So when you see Schwab, sort of, he's talking in French in the French TV. He's talking in Swiss German in the German TV, and he's talking English, of course, at the World Economic Forum and so on. That's not unusual for Swiss. So that's no sign of genius in Swiss terms. And if you're going to be the banker of Europe, then you need to be multilingual, and the Swiss certainly are that, if anything. So Schwab. So he's got a degree, as I understand it, in engineering and economics. I don't think he's practiced in either one, or if he did, he's very, very minimally. So he's a professional uni student type thing. And then just one day he decides he's going to set up this World Economic Forum, and then presto, like magic, just magic. Suddenly he's got all the big banks, all the world leaders, everyone sort of flocking to his meetings. And suddenly he's the great guru. He's getting book publishing deals. I mean, no questions asked, and banging them out. And there's no way his English is good enough to write those books in English. I mean, supposedly it's in English. There's just no way his English is good enough to do that. His phrasing and syntax, he just couldn't do it. So I'm assuming they're ghostwritten, maybe written in the German, which I think he's most familiar with, and then translated. That's possible. But we're somehow led to believe that this nobody from nowhere suddenly forms this international World Economic Forum, pretty much single-handed, and has all the world leaders, all the richest people in the world, all flocking to his meetings, and somehow he's the one who put it all together. I mean, that's clearly bullshit. So he was chosen as a front man way back, whenever in the day, by the globalist cabal. They thought that we need a front man, him. And he was put out front, and so he's the talking head who does what he's told and comes out. I mean, he doesn't have sufficient background in anything to be able to have formulated the ideas that he allegedly has. So I don't believe that Klaus Schwab's a real pro. He's an invention of the globalist machine, in the same way that Greta Thunberg is. Now, what we're led to believe about Greta is that she just magically decided one day, this physically and mentally retarded girl, one day she decides to take the day off school, holding a sign, sitting in one of the main plazas of Stockholm, wherever it was, and in Sweden, and just decides to do it. And that very day, a guy decides to walk past, way out of the way of his office, nowhere near any place he's going to, suddenly decides to walk directly past her, spots her, and suddenly decides that she's going to be the new face of global climate action. And just as suddenly and just as magically, masses of resources, a massive propaganda machine build up around her in seconds flat. And she's off and running now as the globalist propaganda poster girl. Now, if you look at Schwab, his sort of rise, if you like, was the same thing. Suddenly, everyone's going to this meeting. I mean, that's clearly bullshit, as it is with Greta Thunberg. This is how the globalists invent these characters. But coming back to sort of the politicians, what the globalists have done is they've put politicians in and made sure certain people getting elected that are very unimpressive, who've never had real jobs. Maybe you've never had to work at all. I mean, look at Joe Biden, for Christ's sake. I don't think he's ever had a real job. I mean, he's been a nobody and then worked in some sort of, I think he was got elected to some local council, and he's been a political hack, goon, stooge all his life. So, I mean, what does he know of real life, for Christ's sakes? They're picking, professional bureaucrats and hangers-on and stooges and flunkies and people from, teachers and those sort of people, and they're putting them all over the professional uni students. They're putting them all over the place into the key positions. Even Boris Johnson, I think, he worked for journalists for a while. I don't think he's done anything else in his life. So the people who've actually lived life had to earn a living, make a living, had to start up a business, make a successful go of it, have had to take responsibility for their lives, pay the bills, all this sort of thing. Those aren't the people who are in Parliament today. I mean, there's hardly any of those people in there. And the people in the whole globalist machine are simply there to push globalisation under the control and direction of the globalist cabal. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.